Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mega Lestari Hartono Putri. So today in this tranche of this video, I would like to upload this video as the requirement of the mid test of our mid test in the class of Dr. Mawardin for the subject which is philosophy of science and research. So in this video, it will be about 5 major points that have been explained by Dr. Mawardin. So the 5 points are: first, why philosophy of science; the second is explanation, causes and law; and the third is about scientific explanation and its content. The fourth will be about quantitative research methodologies, and then the last will be about the qualitative methodologies. So before I'd like to explain you about the 5 major points, I would like to tell you that I'm the second group of this class. So my group was explaining about the explanation, causations, and laws. And before we're going to the points, I would like to tell you that in this class, Dr. Mawardin have divided us into 5 groups, and in the very first meeting, he divided us into 5 groups, and each group has different points that need to be explained. So the groups is required to make the paper and also make the PowerPoint presentations. They are obliged, every person in the group are obliged to explain about the point, and Mr. Mawardin in the end of the meeting, Mr. Mawardin will give us additional explanation about the points that have been explained. And all of the students have the same task for every meeting, which is we are obliged to write about the minutes of meeting. If it is the first group that is explaining their presentation, so the second, third, fourth, and the fifth group will be write about the minutes of meeting. It will happen also for the second group. When the second group is explaining their presentations, so the first group, third, and fourth, and fifth will write in the minutes of meeting. And in the last of the meetings, which is the fifth meeting, Mr. Mawardin will ask us to give the summary of all meetings into one file, which is all the summary that I will explaining you right now. It is called the visual elaboration for mid test, and this video will be about the oral elaboration for mid test. So we'll just go to the first part, which is why philosophy of science. So in this first part, it is divided into few points. The first point is the relationship between science and philosophy. So science, as we recognize, it seems to have begun with the ancient Greeks. The history of science for the ancient Greek to the present in the history of one compartment of philosophy after another, breaking away from philosophy and emerging as a separate discipline. In the past or 50 years, philosophy, millenniums long concerned with logic, has given rise to computer science. In this point, it actually telling us that the philosophy and science have been integrated since a long time ago, but before they have different names, like by the 3rd century before BC, Euclid's work had made geometry of a science of space, separate from but still taught by philosophers in Plato's academy. Galileo, Kepler, and finally Newton's revolutions in the 17th century made physics a subject separate from metaphysics. So all the scientists from previous years have already explained about their own philosophy with their own research. And then the next is about scientific questions and question about science. So Actually, when it is about philosophy, you will question more than answer. So beside this question that cannot be answered yet, I mean the question from the philosopher, there are questions about why the science cannot cannot or perhaps will never be answered to these questions. The questions from this philosopher will not ever be answered by these scientists. Call examples the questions about what a number is, or what time is, or what justice and beauty are. First order questions, and the second order questions about why science cannot as yet cope with the first order with the first order questions, and the sams and also they will ask themselves about the limits of the science and how it does work, how it's supposed to work. The questions will not be answered by the scientists, but answering the questions will either enable us to begin to make progress on the hitherto unanswered first order questions, or enable us to recognize that some of these first order questions are not one science can or needs to be answered. For example, for a very simple example is when you are asking about where does the letter A came from, where does the letter B came from, or how can you know, how can we decide it is one and it is two. It is actually the questions that no need to be answered by the scientists, and it also cannot be answered. And for the third part of why philosophy of science is about modern science as philosophy. Besides the traditional questions which each of the science left as an intellectual legacy to philosophy, the development of the science over 2 millennia and more has persistently raised new questions with which philosophers have struggled. Moreover, these 2 millennia of scientific development have shaped and changed the agenda of philosophical inquiry as well. Scientific has surely been the most powerful source of philosophical inspiration since its revolutionary successes of the 17th century. And the fourth part of this point is about science and Western civilizations. Whether we like it or not, science seems to be the only universally welcome contribution of European civilizations of all the rest of the world. It is arguably the only thing developed in Europe which is every other society, culture, region, nation, population, and ethnicity that has learned about it has adopted from Europe. So we cannot deny that actually something from Europe's civilizations that is being used by us and being accepted by whole people in this world is the science itself, the art, the music, the literature, architecture, economy, order, legal codes, ethical and political value systems of the West have by no means secured widespread acceptance. So in meaning that actually the only thing that we can be thankful and can be thankful for all people, that can be accepted by all people in this world, all stages and races, it's about science. So we're going to the second point of our major points that I've tell you before is about the explanation, causation, and laws. This point was explained by my group before. So the first point is about the first part is about logical positivism sets the agenda. Philosophy said by Aristotle begins with wonder, and by philosophy Aristotle means science. Aristotle was right. Science seeks explanations to source one to source one wonder, but so do other human beings or human enterprises. The differences between science and other enterprises that seek explanations of why things are the way they are can be found in the sort of standards that science sees itself for what will count as an explanation, a good explanation and a better explanation. The philosophy of science seeks to uncover those standards and the other rules that govern scientific method. It does not part in examining the sorts of explanations scientists advance, accept, criticize, improve, and reject. So in here, in this part, actually, we are telling you that all people actually having the same questions that is and they also seek for the answer, but it is told that only scientists that will give you a better explanation than the other human enterprises because they have their own method, which is the scientific method, and they also have their own scientific explanation. So the next point is about defining scientific explanation. So traditionally, the philosophy of science has sought a definition of scientific explanation, but not a dictionary definition. A dictionary definition merely reports how scientists and others actually use the word scientific explanation. Traditional philosophy of science seeks a checklist of conditions that any scientific explanation should satisfy. When all are satisfied, the checklist guarantees the scientific adequacy of an explanation. In other words, the traditional approach seeks a set of conditions individually necessary and jointly sufficient for something's being scientific explanations. So the explicit definitions, or as it was sometimes called, these explications or rational reconstructions of the dictionary definition would render the concept of scientific explanation precise and philosophical well-founded. So actually, when you are having the answer for the questions that have been asked by the philosopher, you have to have the scientific explanations where all the scientifics is actually agree and satisfy with your explanations. When they are satisfied, they will consider your answer as the scientific explanations. And so the third part is why do laws explains. The logical empiricists early identified several features of a law on which there has continued to be wide agreement. Laws are universal statements of the form all A's are B's, or if even happen, the invariably even F occurs. For example, all pure samples of iron conduct electric currents at standard temperature and pressure, or if an electric current is applied to a sample of iron under standard temperature and pressure, then the sample conducts the current. So in here there is the explanation about the law of the explanation itself. For examples, when there is a law about all the A's are B's, even if it happens, then invariably even F occurs. So when there is a basic law, it's actually they will get back to the first law even if there is another phenomena, unless they will do another research for that phenomena. And then the fourth part is about the counter examples and the pragmatic of explanations. So progress in the philosophy of science has often consisted in the construction of counter examples to analysis, definitions or explications, and then revisions of the definitions to accommodate the counter examples. Since The sort of analysis traditionally preferred by logical empiricists provides a definition in terms of conditions individually necessary and jointly sufficient for the concept of being explicated. Counterexamples can come in two different forms. First, examples that most informed person will concede to be explanation but which fail to satisfy to one or more to the of the one or more of the conditions that laid down. Second is an examples that no one takes to be acceptable scientific explanations, but which satisfy all the conditions. And we'll go next to the next part, which is about the scientific explanation and its discontent. This is the third part of our five main points. So the first part of this third point is a brief history of philosophy of science. The history of this philosophy is intertwined with the history of the natural sciences. Long before the 19th century, when the term science began to be used in its modern meaning, who are now counted among the major figures in the history of Western philosophy, were often equally famous for their contributions to natural philosophy. The bundle of inquirers now designated as science. So on the 19th century, they say that philosophy was natural philosophy is like inquirers, and now it is said that it is a science. So it is from inquirers and become to the questions, and then now it become the science. And then the second part is about definition of philosophy of science. Philosophy of science is a branch of philosophy concerned with the foundation, methods, and implications of science. Philosophy of science is about as useful to scientists or ornithology is to birds. It was said by Craig Callender on 1968. The central questions of this study concern what qualifies as science, the reliability of scientific theories, and the ultimate purpose of science. So that is what happened in the philosophy of science. And then the third is about the scientific explanation. Some philosophers have sought a future of scientific explanation that is deeper than its employment of laws and commitment to reporting causal relations. They have sought the nature of explanation in the unifications of disparate phenomena under deductive systems that explanations, and especially explanation of laws, often provide. But beyond unification, people have sought even more scientific explanation, purpose, and intelligibility. And then the next part is about the quantitative research methodologies. We are going to explain you about the two methods of research. First is quantitative, and then second is qualitative. The first I'll explain you about the quantitative research methodologies. So the definitions is this was quoted by Aliaga and Gunderson in Apuke, or in 2017 state that quantitative research method as the explaining of an issue or phenomenon through gathering data in numerical form and analyzing with the aid of mathematical methods, or in particular statistics. Sometimes in the class we say that quantitative research methodologies is when you can count the data and you can count it with the exact number, and it can be measured, and then we can call it quantitative. And then the second is about the essential characteristic of experimental research. First is comparison of groups. Second is manipulations of the independent variable, and then the third is randomizations. So the essential of quantitative research of the experimental is you have to get two groups, the control groups and the groups that will get your treatment, and then you will have the manipulations of the independent variable, and the third is you have to randomly choose your sample. It is very different with the qualitative research where you should choose who is your sample, but for the quantitative research you have to randomly choose your sample. And then the third is the types of quantitative research method. First is survey research, which is very commonly happen to the undergraduate and the postgraduate of students. We do the survey research most of the time. And then the second type is cross-sectional surveys, and third is longitudinal survey. And next about the quantitative research is about quasi-experimental research. This is also very commonly happen to the undergraduate students, which is quasi-experimental research. It is actually attempts to establish cause-effect relationship among the variables. So when it is about the quantitative research, you will have two variables, and when you are going to do the quasi-experimental research, you will choose how this one of these variable affect the other variables. That is what happened in the quasi-experimental research. Next is the non-quasi-experimental research, often called true experimentations, use the scientific method to establish the cause-effect relationship among a group of variables to make up a study. And then the last is we are telling you about the steps of conducting quantitative research. First is the theory, second is hypothesis, the third is research design, the fourth is operationalizing concept, the fifth is selection of research or sites, and sixth, selection of your respondents or your sample for your populations, and then the seventh is data collection, the eighth processing the data, and then the ninth is data analysis, the 10 is you will explaining about your findings and your conclusions about your research, and then the 11 is about the 11 is you need to write what is your findings. There are so many methodologies that you can find in quantitative research. The first is population and sample, and then the second is probability sampling method, the third is non-probability sampling method, and yeah, only three of them. The instrument that you can find of quantitative research, sometimes it is instrument that you can count the exact result. It is not descriptive, but it is quantitative, so there is a number, we can count it statistically. It is like pre-test and post-test. And then the second is interview, telephone interview, face-to-face interview. Sometimes the questions will be close-ended questions. It will be just answered by yes or no, or like multiple choice sometimes. And then the fourth is about the survey or questionnaires. The questionnaire also would be close-ended questions. You can choose giving rates or having yes or no questions. And then the fourth is about observation, structure observations. And the data analysis technique the first we can have the data validations, data editing, and data coding. So we will move to the next method, which is qualitative research method. So when quantitative research method is talking about the number, the qualitative research method is describing the theories that you will use in your research. Frankel in 2007 defined the qualitative research studies that studies where that investigates the quality of relationship activities, situations, or materials. It is described by its aims, methodology, and the kind of data collected to understand the different phases of social life. So the general characteristic of qualitative research is there are so many methodologies of qualitative that exist, but there are certain general features that characterize most qualitative research studies. Not all qualitative studies will necessarily display all of these characteristics with equal strength. Nevertheless, taken together, they give a good overall picture of what is involved in this type of research. So we will move to the steps of making qualitative research. First is you're gonna prepare and organize your data, and you will review and explore your data. You will develop a data coding system, and you will assign codes to the data and identify recurring terms. So qualitative research objectives in general, these types of research include information about the phenomenon that is being explored in a study, research participants, or the location of the study. Qualitative research can also state the research design that chosen. The characteristic of this kind of research is first, there are natural environment, researcher as the key instrument, multiple sources of data, inductive data analysis, the meaning of the participants, design that develops or emergent designs, theoretical perspective, interpretive, and a holistic account. The approach that you can apply for in doing qualitative research is first ethnography, phenomenology, field research, and grounded theory. And for the data analysis, there are 5 data analysis for qualitative. First is content analysis, second is narrative analysis, third is discourse analysis, the fourth is framework analysis, and 5 is grounded theory. So that is all about the qualitative research method, and that will be the last point of our subject that has been explained by Dr. Mawardin from the first meeting to the last meeting. I think that's all from me. I say thank you very much. So my name is Mega Lestari Hartono Putri with the student ID with A1222117. Thank you very much.